Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 54 of the Hunger for the Hustle podcast. Smashing them out today, back to back. This is the second one, and I've got a third one coming up a little bit later. My second guest on the show today, Sheena Yap Chan, is a blogger, podcaster, consultant, author, and speaker on building self-confidence. I love Sheena's mission, and I can't wait to talk about it. She currently inspires women through her podcast called the Tao of Self Confidence. I hope I've got that right. Where she interviews Asian women about their inner journey of self-confidence. Sheena's mission is to help Asian women boost their confidence to live their authentic selves, and help Asian women create a voice in the world and create a stronger representation of Asian women. I love that cause. Can't wait to speak more about it. Sheena, live from Canada, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jake, thanks for having me. Really excited to just be here today and just share my story and some tips to help your listeners out there.
It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you along. And we were just chatting about your podcast off camera. You've been in the game for a fair while longer than me. You said you've been doing it for 5 years, over 800 episodes, which is just fantastic. And we were both talking about how, it's a labor of love. It doesn't even feel like work when we're doing it because you just enjoy doing it so much. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about how that podcast came around and started.
For sure. I mean, back then I always wanted to find a way to elevate women's voices, especially Asian women's voices. And when I first started podcasting, I actually had no clue what a podcast was. I mean, I always saw it on my Apple iTunes and I'm like, what's a podcast? I would just look at it and like, what's a podcast? I've never heard of these things, right? And, when I started realizing what they were, it was like the perfect platform because, people can download it at any given moment. They can listen to it while they're jogging or, stuck in traffic or, taking care of their kids, right? Because everyone lives busy lives. And like, I wanted to do something that wasn't a blog or a YouTube channel because like, I just wanted a platform that was more accessible and more convenient for people. And so, I invested in a course to figure out how to get this thing going. It's not fun, especially when you're not a technical person.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Cool,
yeah. And, I also had a podcast like support group that would help me throughout my journey, like kind of like, ask them for feedback. And so when I first started my podcast, I actually had a different title for it. I really wanted to call it The Stripper because my tagline was to strip your limiting beliefs away. And so I had a graphic designer hired to do the artwork, and it was basically like a woman with a whip, and like that stripper form, like a silhouette of it. And so I actually sent that graphic work to my support group. And, of course, the answer I wanted was not the answer I got, right? Which is great, right? Because you always want to hear what you need to hear versus what you want to hear, right? So, I got, this isn't the right message. You're going to attract the wrong audience. It's not going to work when you have this title. And at first I was like, oh my God, I'm such a failure. If I can't even get the name properly, how am I get the show good, up and running? And we all have that, right? It's like the first mistake we do, and we feel like we're a failure and it's the end of the world. And, I just had to, go back to the drawing board and ask a friend to help me out. And that's when the Tao of Self Confidence came out. And it was just a huge lesson for me. I like sharing the story because I want people to realize the importance of being clear versus being clever. Being like that title, The Stripper, was just me being clever. And then, having a title that really is clear and people can see it was just like a whole different ball game. When I sent the second artwork for the new title, everyone loved it. Everyone's like, this is way better. Like, I understand what you're saying. You're going to attract the right audience. And so, I went from there. And of course, when you first start anything new, it's like scary. You have all these moments of self-doubt in your mind. You're like, are people going to like my show? Is it going to work out well? Is it going to be a success? Are people going to like my voice? Are they going to think I'm just some crazy Asian girl putting some show out there? And it delayed me a lot for a while because I was just scared. I just was so scared to put it out there because I was so scared of failure. And so it wasn't until a friend just told me to put it out there. Even if it fails, at least and you can just move on to the next. And so I put it out there. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today putting up, talking about the show. And so, like I mentioned, it's been 5 years, right? A lot of ups and downs, like I mentioned, it's a labor of love, like trying to, interview over 800 women in a span of 5 years is a lot of work, right? And you even like just trying to get guests, 800 women in a show, you get a lot of rejection. Not everyone says yes, and you just have to keep moving and pushing forward, because I had a big mission and a purpose for this show, which was to create a support system, especially for Asian women who deal with self-confidence issues, because growing up, I never had that, and I wish I had it, right? And the second one is representation. Representation is huge for me, because growing up, I never had that as well. Living in Canada in the early 90s, all I ever saw was, white people on TV. And because of that, I wanted to name myself Heather, have blonde hair and blue eyes, because that's what I thought beauty was. I thought being Asian was being shameful. So that's why these are the main reasons why I created the podcast.
Yeah, and well done on doing such a fantastic job and having such a good, clear intent at the start. Although I must say, I'm pretty glad you didn't go with the stripper one, because I think that would have been very confusing to people on the face of it about what they were, actually going to be listening to and about. To your point, it's great. That's why it's great to be involved in groups of like-minded people that have already done or are going after the same thing. And particularly when they're going to just give you straight up, honest advice, no filter, because it can. Sometimes you have the best idea with pure intentions, but you put it out there and you need some feedback from the public, and the feedback you get doesn't quite align with what you thought. And then of course the project and the idea only gets better, doesn't it? So.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that's really your intent's fantastic, and it comes out of like a lot of good businesses and projects. It comes out of a personal need, a personal desire, or a personal lack. For you, it was the confidence and the representation, and stepping forth into that and realizing that you can be the change and doing it at scale like you have. Is just a fantastic thing, and I really congratulate and commend you on doing it, and for working so hard at it as well. Like you said, a lot of ups and downs there, but you didn't quit. You're still very much in the game, and here you are, 800 episodes later, which is just, I bet you can't wait for 1,000.
Yeah.
Great milestone. And I think as well, you talked about a bit there about guests and finding guests. There's a particularly when you're wanting to find guests that are relevant to what you do, and that are gonna bring good value, good quality to your show. I really believe it's a thing of, I know I do a lot of episodes, but I really do try to make sure that every single one of my guests is going to bring value to the show in the context of what we speak about. But I can imagine that you get a lot of knockbacks along the way, as I have. And that's just how it goes, isn't it? But you have to get past it and rise through it, and know that there's actually an infinite number of supply of guests. It's just finding them that's the tough part, and then convincing them to come on the show, particularly if some people aren't too keen to go live in front of a camera, And that can be a whole issue within itself, because you're like, hey, come on, I know you've got a great story, and I know you'd give some great value, and we just need to get past this little barrier of you not liking to be in front of the camera.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know what it's like to be afraid of doing video, because I was there, when I first did when I started my first video, it was a hot mess. It took me like 2 hours to do a 2-minute video. I would turn on the camera or my phone, talk about something, and then fumble and turn it off. And then I do it again. And I did that for like 2 hours straight, because I was so scared that the words weren't just coming out properly. And I was just so afraid of like what people might think of me being on video. They would be like, look at this crazy Asian girl being on video talking about nonsense. Why are we even looking at her? And, that's how I used to always see things, because, growing up, I was just like told to like never make any noise, just be in the background, just do as you're told and never rock the boat. And so this was all like new to me. It was totally out of my comfort zone. And video is probably the most scariest thing any person can do. Okay. Just to like put yourself out there and just like share, whatever your views are, even just you as a person. Like, it takes a lot of courage to do it. And I know a lot of people are scared of doing video. You know, especially the people who bash you the most are the ones who's the most scared to like go out there and do a video. So to anyone who's done a video, even for the first time, just give yourself a pat on the back, because it's not easy. I know I've been there. I had like, you know, shaky arms, stuttering words, sweaty palms, like sweaty armpits out of nervousness. And that's just me being honest.
Yeah, no, value that, right? And there's a lot of people who'll be listening who I'm sure take a lot of value out of that. Now, I'd just like to rewind back for a second, and I hope you don't mind talking about this, but I think it's going to be something important to talk about and great value, particularly, you know, for any of the Asian women that are listening. But you said, you know, when you grew up, it was about, you know, it wasn't about this, but you were told to, you know, be quiet and just be in the background a lot. Do you think that's something that's kind of plays out a lot for young Asian girls in families?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's passed on from generation to generation. It's a very generational like upbringing, right? We're just told to live one certain way. It's like the minute you're born, your life is pretty much set out for you. You know, you go to school, get a job, get married, and like either work for your family, get a good job, or you work somewhere, you know, and never just rock the boat, because they think, you know, this is the way to success, right? There's only one way, because that's the only way they know from generation to generation. So it's
Right.
so that's why like so many women, you know, especially like feel trapped, because if it's like they have to stay the course, or else anything outside of that is deemed shameful. And it's such an unfortunate thing, because I've interviewed like over 700 Asian women, and they've done some amazing things, like things I never thought was possible. They did it, right? I've interviewed a woman who's a Christmas song artist. I've interviewed a woman who can fly a plane with her feet. I've interviewed, you know, a woman who went to jail and was a drug offender and sold drugs, but now is a motivational coach, and was even, you know, helping out in the Dwayne Johnson's, like one of his motivational reality shows. So it's like, you know, Asian women are not, you know, just one stereotypical thing. Like there's so many talents each person has. And that's what we have to like, you know, bring out when it comes to representation, because so many people just, you know, judge us by our stereotypes. You know, all Asian women are bad drivers. Asians are good at math. You know, not all of us are good at math. You know, not all of us are bad drivers. I mean, everyone's different, and, you know, they're different in their own way. Even recently, last weekend, I don't know if you're a baseball fan. I'm not a baseball fan, but I do like when a woman breaks those ceilings, right? And so one lady, her name's Kim Ng, she's the first woman in history to be a general manager in a major sports team, which is amazing.
Wow.
But if you ever, yeah, I think for the Miami Marlins. So, but if you ever read her credentials, she should have been a general manager 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes the fact that we're women, it takes a little bit longer, because if a man had those credentials, they would have been a general manager right away. I mean, she went through 5 different interviews, you know, in 5 different baseball teams to be a general manager, never got accepted. She decided to work for the league for about 15 years, and now is her chance to like, you know, be that first person. Now she's able to open the doors for so many other young girls there who want to be in the sports industry, who want to, you know, strive to be a general manager. And this is huge, because as Asian women, society doesn't see us in leadership roles. And this is probably why it took 15 years for her to be a general manager. And the more we can just like showcase more leadership roles, more women who like even celebrate the things they do, because we've also been told to always be humble, never brag, you know, because it's not proper, it's not ladylike. And there's so many like expectations we have to live by, or so many labels that, you know, we're just like, you just feel trapped. We can't do anything.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear that. And I'm sure, sorry, what was the lady's name? Kim A, was it?
Kim Ng, or her last name is NG. So
okay. And
yeah.
so I'm sure she's going to kick some ass and be a great leader, and she's going to probably show a few guys, you know, how to get it done. You know, in a better way than they can do it, right? I think that's fascinating. You see that play out a lot, you know, where women go into positions as leaders where typically it's always been men who have occupied the role. And actually what you find, because they bring a different energy to it, of course, we know, you know, they say women are from Venus and men are from Mars, you know. My partner even told me that she said that's true, but I'm from Jupiter apparently, so I don't know what that means. But I think when you see that play out, that where men have been typically always in a role, and it's always been for generations, many years. And then a woman comes into that role. I think it brings a whole new lease of energy. They hit things from a different angle. They're respected at scale, just like they should be, particularly by maybe some people in that kind of organisation or team that didn't completely respect women before. That they have to bring about that change, and so they should. And I think it's always a great thing to see, and it always inherently leads. Once the first person does it, it's like Roger Bannister. He was the first guy to run the 4-minute mile. I think in the year following he did it, over 100 people did it, or something to that number, a huge number. Once someone sets the precedent and someone changes the way, it sets up everyone else for them behind them to follow. So yeah, more of that, please, world. More of that happening.
Totally.
Yeah. I think, and we're going to see it play out. We're seeing it play out now, and I think it's just going to happen even more and more. And I really hope it does happen even more. In sports teams, in the business world, in all those ways. I think it's a refreshing change and a long-awaited one.
For sure. I mean, a lot of people feel like even industries that you think are dominated by women, it's still run by men, right? And I think that also needs to change. Like I remember interviewing a dancer who's, in the ballet industry, and that's still run by men, People don't realize that, makeup industry, run by men too. So it's like we need to have a different dynamic and change, right? Because, 80% of the buying power is women, yet most of these industries are run by men. So there needs to be like, a smaller gap.
Yeah, for sure. That really surprises me to hear. Not that I would know, just because I don't know much about those two industries you mentioned. It does surprise me to hear that they're run by men. I mean, me and just my monkey brain here would think that it's all women in the makeup office and that they run it head to toe. But yeah, okay, maybe of course that's not how it works out.
Yeah.
Now, Sheena, I know you have a book. Well, I should say 2 books, and I'm sure you can. It's like you did have a book coming out that's now it's transformed somewhat and it's turned into 2 books. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for sure. So in 2021, we do have 2 books. One that I co-created with another lady. It's called Asian Women Who Boss Up, and that book will feature 16 Asian women who are going to share their story of how they're able to forge their own path and thrive by being an entrepreneur. And it's very important that we do have a book that feature Asian women on the cover, because if you ever go on Amazon, how many books do you see that feature Asian women on a cover? A lot.
No.
Yeah, and so representation is huge. And the only way to create that representation is through different forms of media, right? And we were so passionate about creating this book that, it just needed to be done, even if we went through so many hardships. And even me, like just being able to pitch this idea was like nerve-wracking, because this was something I've never done before. Yes, I talk about confidence, but talking about confidence and like taking action on your confidence is a whole different level. You go through fears, you go through self-doubt, you fumble along the way, you go through anxiety. I went through all that. I even had moments of depression where I just ate my feelings, because like sometimes you see like things aren't working your way, but I knew that it had to be done. So I just kept pushing through it. And that's what's the most important thing, right? Like I know a lot of people like to glamorize entrepreneurship, thinking like you can get it done in 90 days. No, you can't. The people who got it done in 90 days took 10 years. And I want people to realize like sometimes it may take a while, but it's worth it in the end. And so, that we were just so fortunate. We were able to find 16 amazing women who's, courageous enough to share their story. And so that's coming out in March of 2021. And then the next book I'll be featured in. It's called Women of Color Who Boss Up, because it's the same thing as women of color. We still don't have that representation, and it's badly needed. When I talk to women, they're like, yeah, I don't see any books that feature women of color, in a book cover or like, on Amazon. It's something that's just needed. It's 2020, and yet we still lack a lot of representation. So, we're going to also feature 16 women of color who's going to do the same thing, share their own stories and how they're able to boss up in their life. Because, I want people to realize like there's people out there that kind of look like them who's been able to overcome all these barriers and still thrive. And I just want that person to be like, if she can do it, so can I. because it's very important to have that kind of representation, or else you just won't believe in yourself and you won't take the action to go out there and live the life that you want.
Yes, I completely agree. And I can't wait to see those books come out. And yeah, a collaborative book. I'll tell you, there's actually a book coming out, Hunger for the Hustle, whole other story, but that's going to be a collaborative book as well. I think when many people come together on a project, you know, a team-driven collaborative effort, all, you know, in your case, 16 brains there working towards the same end. I'm sure there might be, you know, some other people as well who are helping just put it together. It just brings more impact, more gravity to the project. And of course, I mean, it helps from a marketing perspective as well, because then there's 16 people behind the book who, of course, they want their, you know, friends, families, audiences to read it and read their story as well. And also, I think in the fast-paced, busy world that we live in, of course, people don't always have the time to digest the whole book. So if you have a book full of chapters from different people, you know, you can easily pick that up and go through one chapter and then another time another chapter. It's a lot more digestible, I find, than you know, a big thick encyclopedia of a book. So yeah, fantastic idea. And I like the way how there's going to be one book but it became two. Isn't it funny how one project can just often lead to other things, and as you get speaking to people about them, they grow and they develop, and often they can, I mean, it's still a similar thing, but sometimes they lead into a completely different thing from what you originally started to do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes you just never know until you just take action in your own life, right? Like things just appear when you least expect it and it just feels good, right?
Can you hear me?
And sorry? I'm here.
That's weird.
Hello?
Hey, sorry about that. Technical.
Sorry about that.
We're back. We're back. Yeah, I've had a bit of issues with the internet connection today. So sorry about that, folks, if you're watching, and thank you for joining us again. So we were just talking about how one project can become many and diversify when you involve other people with it, and that's really what happened with your book there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes when you have a big purpose, like it expands too, right? I mean, yes, I do love, you know, elevating Asian women's voices, but at the same time, you know, women of color also need it as well. And it's something, you know, when you can work together, it's a lot better. You know, I always say better together. And so why not, right? It still helps all of us win. And we create that win-win situation where, you know, we help each other out and bring the voice. And, help other women, especially women of color, be inspired and realize they can do this on their own as well, or they can see themselves, live their dream life or become an entrepreneur or whatever it is they set their mind to.
Yes, yeah, exactly right. And I know that you're a consultant as well. Is that with regard to helping Asian women, or is that with something else?
That's pretty much something I've just started, so I haven't
Okay,
really
fine, yeah,
gotten,
great.
yeah.
That's good. That's all good. So in your, I mean, let's talk about these questions in regard to your podcast. I mean, there's a lot of people watching who, see a lot of podcasts. I think I heard the other day that there's I think it's just broke over 1 million podcasts now out there available, which is huge, and they're growing all the time. Many people may be watching this, particularly Asian ladies. Your audience may be thinking about starting their own podcast inspired by you. And let's talk about some of the challenges you've had along the way, and perhaps some of the failures. And I always think it's worth mentioning those, because that's where we learn a lot of value inside them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 1 million shows is not actually that much. So I want people to realize podcasting is a very underutilized platform, because if you check how many blogs there are, there's like over 100 million.
True.
And then even YouTube channels alone, there's still a big number. So there's no better time to start a podcast than now. And of course, yeah, I've had a lot of like ups and downs. There's days where I wanted to throw my computer against the wall because of the technical side of it. Like the technical side was really like a big frustrating thing for me. Like editing my first episode took like 2 hours for a 5-minute audio. Even like trying to figure out how to like contact people to be on my show was like really nerve-wracking, because back then I was so afraid people might say no, or like, reject my idea. And, I do have a lot of rejection. I do get a lot of people who say no to the show. And, I want people to realize that I get more no's than yeses. So can you imagine, I interviewed over 800 women. Imagine how many no's I got. So, this is the truth, right? And I just want people to realize like, this is what you get. But at the same time, like if you have a big purpose, it's not going to matter, because for me, one of the biggest things about making this podcast, the show, the way, the results that it's gotten, is because I led with my purpose. Every time I led with my purpose, it just like made things a lot easier. And like, even when there's days when I think like, why am I doing this? Like, is this even worth doing it? Like, and I remember like someone messaging me like, thank you so much. Your show really helped me out. I was able to join a speaking class, and, really gave me the courage to do that. And so just messages like that make a huge difference, because as long as you can like make a difference in one person, then like, for me, that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's all I say as well whenever I do any speaking, or to that point in the podcast. If just one person gets in touch and says, hey, look, I enjoyed that episode, or enjoyed this episode, I got some value from it, I learned something from it, yeah, that's fine, that's mission complete for me. It's here for the audience, and just to keep doing it and hoping that they get some value from it is really what genuinely carries me through in doing it. And I can see that that's what carries you through in doing yours as well. So it's fantastic, and it's no surprise to me at all that we're here today in this same space with the same values and working towards the same end, because that's how it works. The law of attraction. I'm not sure if you've ever. Yeah, I can see it by the way you're nodding. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, The Secret was my first book. So.
Brilliant. Yeah, mine too actually. Or the film. I'm not sure if I read it before I watched the film, but either way, it's great. And then tell us, let's move on from that into some big wins and triumphs you've had for your podcast. I mean, in itself, the achievement of having so many guests and keeping it going so long, but I'm sure there's more than that.
The podcast has been great. I've been able to, interview a lot of people of influence. To me, having a podcast is the easiest way to, connect with people of influence. Just because, a lot of people like being interviewed in podcasts, and I always lead with my message. Like I was able to interview, a very high profile person in the Philippines, and which I never thought would have been possible. Like this person has over 2 million followers on Instagram, and here's me, just like, who am I? But it's because I had such a huge message, like, they said yes. And so those are some of the things. Even I was reading some other podcasters' story, how she has a podcast based on a show that used to have Theo from The Cosby Show. I
Right.
keep forgetting. And one of her dreams was to actually interview him. And she didn't and she told us how he actually followed her podcast for a year, but she was just too scared to ask him if to like be interviewed on her show. After a year, she finally had the courage, and she actually got to interview him. Like, they had a Zoom meeting, and she it was like her lifelong dream achieved, because she had a show about his current TV show, and it was like
Right.
he was one of the actors. But yeah, you just never know. I mean, I went to a
Yeah.
podcasting convention. I was able to take a photo with Silent Bob. If anyone knows who Silent Bob is, Kevin Smith is the actor. Now you know how old I am, but it's all good. But like,
Mhm.
it's just crazy. You just never know who you might connect with, because it's such a powerful platform that's still very underutilized. And yeah, I mean, some were just being featured. I was featured in a newspaper in the Philippines, which is crazy because I never knew that would have been possible. I mean, it wasn't front page or anything, but the fact that I was in a newspaper was like never in my wildest dreams that would have ever happened. And even just doing this book project, if I did not, talk about my podcast and how long I've been doing it and the stats and like where it's been going, like I wouldn't have this project, right? Like this book project to begin with. So I really have the podcast to thank for, because without this, like I wouldn't have been able to talk about confidence or have people ask me about, confidence questions or be that go-to person. Like I didn't even think of it that way, right? I just remember one girl asking me like, hey, I actually need an article done about, how to build confidence at work because you're the go-to confidence person. And for me, it's like, I didn't even think of it as that way. I just like talking about confidence because I really want to help people build their confidence,
Yeah.
because confidence is like a big factor, especially in entrepreneurship, right? You need to
Mhm.
have confidence to go out there and, promote yourself or go after things that you want, or even make the first move to like, show your product or service or whatever it is that you want to do. Like it takes a lot of guts, it takes a lot of courage and confidence.
Yeah, I agree. And in that regard, I mean, what do you think are some of the best ways to build up confidence, particularly for some people who are listening who perhaps don't have much of it?
Yeah, for sure. So, every person's different. I say you try many different ways to build confidence, kind of like a trial and error thing, because what may work for me might not work for you, right? So, one thing that doesn't work for me at all, and I've tried many times, is meditation. I cannot for the life of me just sit there and have a meditation tape and just go for like 10 minutes, because I end up falling asleep. And for the longest time, I thought something was wrong with me, because I was like, why can't I get this right? Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I meditate like other people? And there's like lives are changed because of meditation. It's because it wasn't for me. And so for
Mm.
me, like my form of meditation is like jogging outside. That's where I can
Oh,
just like mind dump everything, like it's just that's my form. And so this is why it's very important to choose things that work for you, right? Because no one knows you better than yourself. And then when it comes to building self-confidence, I believe in taking small steps versus taking the big leap. It's okay to take the big leap if you can expect that it might not work, right? But if you take that big leap and you don't hit it, it really brings your confidence level down, right? For me, it did. And so for me, just taking it step by step really builds the confidence, because it's those small daily actionable steps is what yield the big results. Those when everyone says they're an overnight sensation, no such thing. They've been working in the background for years and years. So like one great example is Lizzo. People think like she just came out of nowhere. Really, she's been working at it for like 10 years. Sometimes she had to sing just for free beer because they couldn't pay her. And I want people to realize like, what she had to go through to get where she is today took a lot of work. It wasn't an overnight sensation. She's been in this game for a long time. It's just now she's reaping the rewards.
yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And you touched on it earlier that, entrepreneurship it's seen as like glamorous, and that's part of the reason that I do this podcast, to pull back the curtain on that. It's really not that glamorous when you
No.
get of it. Yeah, everyone gives me that exact same response that you just did, Sheena. It's like, yeah, the eye roll. It's really not. And for a half a second, you just go back there into your mind into a time where it wasn't so glamorous, right? But it takes hard work. though, yes, you do get to choose your own hours, but they're often longer than they would be if you're working for someone else. You know, there's a big difference in the cut-off time, I find, you know, and sometimes speaking from a personal perspective here, I find it hard to find that cut-off, particularly if where you live is also kind of your workplace to some degree. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, okay, you get to choose your own hours, and you might be able to have, you know, Monday off because you want to do something else, but it probably means that you've had to work Sunday and Saturday just to make it happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, like you mentioned, you can work your own hours, but you might be working at 2 in the morning,
Yeah,
while the rest of the world is sleeping. And
yeah,
so, yeah, sometimes when I see people like they show off their fancy cars or fancy houses, it's great, but like nobody tells you like this is my little desk that I've been working on for the past 5 years.
mm,
Everything that's ever happened in my life is from this desk. The
mm,
tears, the happiness, the frustrations,
mm.
the failures, the success all happens here. Like, sharing a story, but like kind of like the Amazon guy, right? When he first started, he shows you where he actually started, right?
Yes,
Like very humble, like little desk with his like big glasses and like his
yeah,
ghetto computer. But that's how most people start, right? They start with what they have, right? They're just
yes,
resourceful.
yeah, that's right. Just get going. Yeah, Jeff Bezos, Amazon guys, he started actually with tables that were made from doors because he didn't have money to buy tables. So, you know, it was just one table cut in half in an A-frame and then a table on the top. You're right. You know, people just get started with what you are, where you are, with do what you can where you are with what you have, and just never be satisfied. Keep moving forward, and be resourceful. I think that's a great tip, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
just, and often I think when you open up your mind to being resourceful, it can make you realize how much you actually already have around you. You know, whether that be the people around you, whether you can just embrace the technology that you've got. I know you touched on that earlier. That must have been a bit of a journey for you, getting used to technology. I'm a bit more blessed with the fact that I've always been used to technology. It's always been around me. So taking to the podcast was very easy. But I mean, as we've just evidently showed today, you still get problems. You know, you
Yeah.
still get problems, and it's just about responding to them, not reacting to them, remaining calm and working through them, and not losing your shit, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, even some of the biggest stars have gone through some of their fair share, like being on concert, falling off. They just get back right up and just keep performing, right? Or a fashion model who slips and falls on the runway gets back up and starts walking, strutting like it never happened. Like, things like that. We just pick ourselves back up because we all fall down, right? It's life. Life isn't always linear. It's like a roller coaster. Sometimes you're up,
Mhm.
sometimes you're down, but it's how we react to them that's what matters the most.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a roller coaster, but hold on tight because it's well worth the ride, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about, obviously, the word hustle. It's a part of the title of this podcast, Hunger for the Hustle. I define hustle to be, if you don't see the circumstances around you that you desire, then you go out and you create them. I'd love to know how you define hustle. And as a lady who's pretty busy, got a lot going on, what kind of drives your hunger for it?
I think for me, the hunger for hustle is really creating, a positive impact in the world. I really have a passion for that. Like it's been ingrained with me since I was young. I always knew, even back then when I used to work a job, like I wanted to do something that would benefit, the world or just create an impact, right, as much as I can. And so I think for me, the hunger for hustle is that based on like learning to help others, learning to create win-win situations, learning to create a positive impact in the world, because the more we can create that positive impact, more people out there will, be inspired and take action in their own lives, right? And the more we can help, the more we can create good in this world. I mean, we're here for one reason. We have one life to live. Our life is very short. And sometimes we just don't want to like waste it away, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. So I think that's my definition of hunger for hustle, just doing what it takes to get your purpose out there, right? No matter what the circumstances are. And I know it's hard because I know there's days where I want to quit so badly, where I'm like, is this even worth it? And I have to go back and see why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I feel a lot better after.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great definition, and I think that's gonna bring it home for a lot of people. And yeah, I was just kind of thinking about your answer there and how much sense it makes, quite frankly.
Thank you.
What are some of your goals, dreams, and aspirations for the future of? I know you've got the book coming out, but the podcast. What's the kind of vision for that going forward? It's already something fantastic, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to keep the podcast going as long as I can, as much energy as I have to get it going. Other than that, I really just want to find other ways to elevate, Asian women's voices, women of color's voices, doing what I can to help them realize with her feet, and that is amazing. That's what I want because
on and on. So yeah, I really hope it does have that impact and makes that change that it quite frankly deserves to make.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Now, as we close out, let's go. I'd love to get 3 hot tips from you. For anyone that's maybe, and you can answer them in what regard you like, really, but perhaps to someone who's looking to start a podcast, who maybe has got a concept going in their mind, but they just don't know how to get started and get it out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it starts with what is the purpose of your podcast. Having a purpose is really important, and it doesn't have to be like the grandest purpose at all. If your purpose is just like you have a love to cook and you want to show people how to, share stories of chefs who've been able to start from humble beginnings and work their way up, then start with that. I think just sitting down and writing down the purpose of your podcast is really huge because then it makes everything a lot easier to do, in my opinion. So start with that. I mean, don't worry. I know this is hard, but don't worry about perfection. My podcast isn't perfect after 800 episodes either. Trust me. I don't have for me, how I check the sound is if I can hear them talk, that's good. I don't know what the megahertz is or whatever the level of sound is supposed to be. The way I check it is I can hear her, I can hear me. It's good. So, just take perfection out of it, because if you strive for perfection, you'll never get there. And honestly, just start. Starting is the hardest thing anyone does. Trust me. I know what it's like, because there's so many times I wanted to start and I was so scared, but once you start and just take action on it, it's a lot easier. So yeah, those are the 3 tips that I want to share with you if you want to start a podcast. And like I said, there's no better time than now. Like Jake mentioned, there's only 1 million shows out there, which is not a lot. If you research how many YouTube channels there are or how many blogs are out there, it's like 100 times more. So now is the greatest time to do that, to start a podcast.
You're absolutely right. 1 million is a really small number in the scope of things. I perhaps put that across as a big number because I think it's a bit of a milestone for the podcast world, but in the scope of the world and how many people there are, and particularly, there's 1 million podcasts out there. There's probably, I don't know how many times more, but there's probably maybe 10x more people that are actually listening to them. Particularly if you have a niche, like you do with yours, like I do with mine. If there's a niche that you're pertaining to, then yeah, it's going to be a hit. And there's no better time than now. The technology is there to make you do it. It's very low cost of entry. There's no one telling you what you can and can't talk about. Yeah, I really resonate with you there. You just got to get started and get it out there.
Yeah, and especially now that most of us are on lockdown, now's a great time to figure everything out while you're still stuck at home.
Yes, it's a good point you make. I don't think I would have come out with this podcast this year if it hadn't been for lockdown. There's obviously a lot of change going on in this time, but there's a lot of opportunities and blessings if you keep your eyes and ears open to them.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have these book projects if it wasn't for the lockdown as well. So, anything's possible.
Yes, it certainly is. Now, I'm going to put the links for where people can find you in the chat, but please go ahead and tell people the best place to find you and your podcast.
So, you can always Google Sheena Yap Chan, which is great because I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan in the world, which is amazing. Brilliant. So, yeah, that's what I tell people. You can also check out my podcast called The Tao of Self Confidence on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the major podcast directories. Or you can check out my website, thetaoofselfconfidence.com, where you can check past episodes, tools and resources, products, services when it comes to building your self-confidence.
Sheena, thanks so much. It's been so good to have you on the show, and keep doing what you're doing. It's great work. I'm going to jump onto your podcast and subscribe. And although it's not something you may think that I would be interested in, I am really now very interested in. And I can't wait to see you get to 1,000 episodes.
I'll let you know when I reach there. And yeah, this is one thing I want to share with people. So you mentioned that, you might not be the right audience because you're not Asian or a woman, but I was reading an article about the book Crazy Rich Asians, and they were studying who their biggest audience is. And their biggest audience is actually white women between like the ages 20 to 45, because they were so interested in the culture. And like, if you ever read the book, the author's very descriptive on like the clothes they wear, the lifestyle they live, all like very like crazy, like descriptive. So just because you're doing something that's like stuck to your niche doesn't mean other people won't like come out and check it. So yeah, that's, I think, a lesson like people can like say, okay, yeah, like just because I'm stuck to this niche doesn't mean it won't expand, because it will.
Absolutely. Love that message. Let's leave it at that. I think it's a great place to end the show.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It was really fun being here today.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for giving me your time and energy. I've really enjoyed it. I'll be speaking to you again soon. That's for sure.
Awesome.